The storm had ended only a few hours ago, but the alien land still trembled with the memory of it. The sky was bruised purple, streaked with lightning that flashed far in the distance. Black clouds hung low, carrying the smell of burned metal and wet dust. A lone human walked slowly through the ruins. His name was Ethan, a maintenance engineer from one of the outer human colonies. His small shuttle had been caught in the plasma storm, forcing him to land on this half-destroyed world. What he saw now looked less like a village and more like a graveyard. Twisted beams of silver metal poked out from the sand. Houses made of crystal and clay had collapsed into broken shells. Every step Ethan took crunched against shattered glass and alien bones. He raised his wrist light, scanning the darkness for signs of life. His radio buzzed with static, no human signals. Then building a sound, faint, weak, almost lost in the wind. It was not a word, not a scream. It was a cry. He turned sharply, following the sound toward what used to be a market square. The air was heavy with smoke. The cry came again, smaller, softer, full of pain. He dropped his tool bag and ran. Under a collapsed roof he found them, two figures trapped under debris. One was a tall alien woman, her pale blue skin covered with dust and blood. Beside her was a tiny child, silent and still. Ethan's heart froze. "Hey, don't move!" he shouted, kneeling beside them. The woman's dark eyes opened in fear. She gasped, seeing a human. Her hand trembled as she tried to shield the child. Ethan didn't stop. He pulled at the metal beam, gritting his teeth as sparks burned his gloves. His muscles screamed, but he didn't care. With one final push, the beam fell aside. He lifted the child gently into his arms. The little alien girl coughed, weakly breathing again. The mother tried to sit up, staring at him in disbelief. "Why are you helping us?" she whispered, her voice cracked and dry. Ethan didn't answer right away. He tore a strip from his sleeve and tied it around her bleeding arm. "Because you needed help," he said simply. She blinked, confusion crossing her face. In her world, humans were not saviors. They were stories used to frighten children, the destroyers, the war makers. Yet here one was, kneeling in the dirt, helping her without hesitation. The wind howled again, shaking what little remained of the shelter. Ethan stood and looked around. The village was dead. Not a single other soul moved. He could feel the silence pressing on his ears. "What happened here?" he asked softly. "The storm," the alien woman said, looking toward the horizon. "It came with no warning. My husband tried to protect us, but the roof fell." Her voice broke on the last word. Ethan lowered his head for a moment. "I'm sorry," he scanned the damage. Most of the structures were beyond repair. The local power cores were buried under sand. But a few walls were still standing, maybe enough to rebuild a small shelter. He turned back to her. "Can you walk?" She nodded weakly. He offered his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Her skin was cool to the touch, trembling with exhaustion. Together they stepped out into the gray light. The storm clouds were breaking apart now. Faint sunlight cut through the mist, shining on the wreckage. The ground glittered with shards of broken crystal, once beautiful, now destroyed. The child looked up at Ethan with wide silver eyes. She didn't speak, but she reached out and touched the human's rough glove. Ethan smiled softly. "You're safe now, little one." As they moved toward the remaining walls, the alien mother whispered, "My name is Lyra." "Ethan," he replied. "We'll find a way to fix this place." Lyra shook her head. "You can't stay." "The others? They fear humans. They'll come back soon." Ethan looked around at the ruins, at the broken homes and shattered hopes. "Then they can be afraid," he said. "But I'm not leaving you here." For a moment, Lyra just stared at him, at the human standing against the ruins of her world. In his eyes, she saw no cruelty, no pride, only something rare. Determination. The wind carried a soft hum through the wreckage, the last echo of the storm. The smell of ozone filled the air. Ethan turned to face the distant mountains where more storms brewed under the clouds. He didn't know why he had landed here, or why he cared so much for strangers from another world. But deep inside, he felt it, that small, stubborn thing that defined humanity. The will to rebuild, the need to protect. As night fell, the ruined village glowed faintly from scattered embers. And in the center of it all, one human and one widowed alien mother stood beside each other, surrounded by silence and ruin, and something new, something fragile. Hope. The night air was cold and silent. Small fires burned in the ruins, flickering like dying stars. Ethan sat by one of them, warming his hands while his mind refused to rest. Across from him, the alien woman, Lyra, sat quietly with her child asleep in her arms. The faint glow of the fire danced across her blue skin and tired face. She had not spoken much since they found safety among the half-broken walls. But her eyes, those deep silver eyes, followed every movement Ethan made. They were full of questions, fear, and something else he couldn't name. Ethan opened a ration pack and slid it toward her. "It's not much," he said softly. "But it'll help for now." Lyra hesitated. "Human food?" He smiled a little. "Safe for most species. You'll be fine." Slowly she took it. Her hands trembled as she fed her child first, watching the little one nibble carefully. Then she tasted it herself. For a long moment she didn't say anything. Ethan leaned back against a half-buried wall, looking at the shattered village around them. "How long have you lived here?" he asked. "All my life," Lyra whispered. "Before the storms, this was a place of trade. Many travelers came. My husband used to craft lightstone tools." Her voice softened when she spoke his name, Terran. He was strong, kind. She stopped, her lips trembling. "He stayed outside when the first strike hit. He thought he could hold the roof up until I got our child to safety." Ethan listened silently. He knew that kind of pain, the helpless kind, the loss that stayed inside your bones. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. Lyra looked up, her eyes shining in the firelight. "Why do you care, human?" "My people told us your kind had no hearts." Ethan gave a small laugh, though there was no joy in it. "They might be right about most of us," he said. "But I've seen enough loss to know what it does. You don't leave someone alone in it." Her gaze didn't leave him. In that moment something shifted, very small, very fragile. The fear in her eyes softened into curiosity. The night stretched on. The wind howled through broken streets, carrying whispers of what once was. Ethan stood and started repairing what he could. A makeshift roof using torn sheets of metal and fragments of alloy frames. Lyra watched him in silence, her head tilted slightly. "You build like you've done this before," she finally said. "I used to fix mining rigs," he replied, hammering a panel into place. "Machines don't thank you. At least this house might." She blinked at him, not understanding the joke, but something about the calmness in his voice made her chest feel less heavy. By dawn, the small shelter stood tall enough to block the wind. Ethan dropped his wrench and exhaled. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it'll hold." Lyra stood at the doorway, her child leaning against her shoulder. The little girl's large eyes reflected the morning light. She whispered something in her mother's ear, and Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. "She said the human smells like rain," Lyra murmured. Ethan chuckled. "I'll take that as a compliment." For a brief second, laughter touched the air, soft, unfamiliar, beautiful. Then the sound of distant engines broke it apart. Ethan's face hardened. He stepped outside, scanning the sky. 2 dark ships crossed the horizon. Lyra's expression turned to dread. "They're scavengers," she said quickly. "They come after every storm. They take what's left, sometimes even people." Ethan's jaw clenched. "Do they know about you?" "They know my name," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They think I carry something my husband left behind. I told them I don't, but they never believed me." Ethan grabbed his blaster rifle and checked the charge. "Then we'll be ready this time." Lyra stared at him, stunned. "You'll fight them?" "For us," he met her eyes. "No one else will." She didn't answer. She only watched him as he moved, calm and focused, every movement confident. The human looked small compared to the open wasteland, but somehow, the space around him felt safer. As the day passed, he reinforced the walls, set up crude alarms using salvaged circuits, and prepared escape routes. Lyra tried to help, gathering scraps and tools, watching how he worked. His patience amazed her. Humans were supposed to be violent, careless, yet here was one rebuilding, not destroying. At sunset, when the sky turned gold and violet, Lyra found herself staring at Ethan again. The firelight caught his tired face, his steady hands. She felt her heart twist in a way she hadn't expected. "What is it?" he asked gently when he noticed her gaze. She looked away quickly. "Nothing, I was wondering if you always do this." "Do what?" "Save strangers," she said. Ethan looked at the broken house they'd built together. His eyes softened. "Only when I can," he said. "And only when it matters." Silence fell again. The child slept beside the fire, the storm finally gone. Lyra looked up at the sky, full of quiet stars, and for the first time since losing her husband, she didn't feel completely alone. She glanced once more at the human sitting beside her, his face calm, his eyes watching the horizon, and she thought, maybe the stars sent him. She didn't say it out loud, but when Ethan smiled faintly, it almost felt like he'd heard her. Morning light broke across the wrecked valley like a promise that had already been broken. Smoke rose from shattered homes, curling into a pale sky still scarred by the storm. Ethan stood at the edge of the rebuilt shelter, watching the horizon in silence. He had slept only an hour. His mind wouldn't stop thinking about what came next. Lyra stepped out quietly, holding her child close. Her eyes followed his gaze. "You're leaving," she said softly. He nodded. "We need more supplies, tools, food, something to reinforce the walls. I saw a settlement about 5 kilometers east when I landed. If there's anything left standing, maybe someone there can help." Lyra's face darkened. "That village." She hesitated, her voice shaking. "They're my people, but they turned us away when Taryn died. They said my husband angered the storm gods. They'll never help you, and they'll never help me." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "Then they'll help because I'll make them listen," he said. His tone calm but firm. He picked up his pack, checked the rifle at his side, and started walking through the dust. The road to the village was quiet. Only the wind spoke, whispering through burned trees and broken fences. Ethan walked for hours, boots crunching against cracked glass and bits of crystal. In the distance, the village came into view, not as ruined as Lyra's, but wounded all the same. Alien figures moved among the debris. Their tall bodies shimmered faintly in the light, repairing walls, gathering remains. As Ethan approached, all movement stopped. Dozens of silver eyes turned toward him. A human was not supposed to be here. He lifted a hand in peace. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said clearly. "I'm just looking for help." No one answered. They simply stared. Then an older alien stepped forward, his crest of silver scales catching the sun. His voice was low and harsh. "You bring trouble by breathing, human. Leave." Ethan didn't move. "There's a woman and a child out there," he said. "Lyra, they survived the storm. I'm helping them rebuild." At the sound of her name, murmurs rippled through the crowd, some faces twisted in disgust, others in fear. "Lyra still lives?" one of them whispered. "She should have left with her cursed blood," another muttered. The elder's eyes narrowed. "We told her husband not to defy the storm. He refused to listen. The gods punished them both." "You should not interfere with fate." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Fate?" he repeated. "You call this fate? Watching a mother and her child die in the ruins while you stand here fixing your walls?" A hiss of anger passed through the villagers. The elder stepped closer, his tone sharp. "You have no place in our affairs, human. Your kind has destroyed enough worlds." Ethan met his gaze without flinching. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But today I'm saving one." He turned away, heading toward an abandoned workshop at the edge of the square. A few of the younger aliens followed him warily, whispering among themselves. Inside, Ethan found old tools, some rusted, some usable, and a small generator half buried under dust. He started to carry what he could. "Leave those," one of the villagers shouted. "Not stealing," Ethan said over his shoulder. "Borrowing." The young alien woman who had followed him stepped forward. Her eyes were filled with something different. Curiosity, maybe guilt. "Is she really alive?" she asked. "Lyra?" Ethan paused, then nodded. "She's alive, but she's lost everything." The young woman lowered her head. "She was my cousin," she whispered. "We thought she died with Taryn." He softened slightly. "She didn't, but she will if I don't get these supplies back." For a moment, no one spoke. Then quietly, the young woman picked up a coil of wire and handed it to him. "Take this," she said. "For her." The elder's voice roared from behind them. "Nara, do not touch that creature." But she didn't move. Her hands trembled, yet she met the elder's eyes. "She's family," she said. "And he's helping her." "What have we done?" The silence that followed was heavy, the kind that carried years of shame. Ethan didn't wait for more words. He nodded in gratitude and left, carrying as much as he could. By the time he returned to the ruins, the sun was low. Lyra stood outside, eyes full of worry. When she saw him, relief flooded her face, then confusion. "You came back," she whispered. "Of course," he said, dropping the pack beside the half-built wall. Brought a few things. Even found someone who still remembers you. She froze. Who? Your cousin, he said. Nara! Lyra's eyes widened, tears forming instantly. She helped you? Ethan nodded. Just a little. But sometimes that's enough. For the first time, Lyra smiled. A real one, small and fragile. You shouldn't have risked it, she said softly. They could have hurt you, he shrugged. I've been hurt before. Not by kindness, though. The wind swept through the ruins again, softer now, carrying a faint warmth. Lyra looked at the tools, at the supplies he'd carried miles through hostile ground, and she whispered, You really mean to stay, don't you? Ethan looked around at the broken houses, the silent stars above. Until you have a home again, he said. That night, Lyra sat awake long after the fire died down, watching the human sleep beside his pack. Her heart ached, not with fear, but with something new. In her world, no one stayed after the storm, but this human had, and in the reflection of her own silver eyes, for the first time she saw not loss, but hope rebuilding itself, one heartbeat at a time. The morning sun was soft and golden, falling over the ruins like a quiet blessing. The smell of burnt earth still lingered, but there was a new sound now. The sharp rhythm of tools striking metal, the hum of effort, and the faint laughter of a child. Ethan wiped the sweat from his forehead as he hammered a panel into place. Hold it steady, he said, glancing toward Lyra. She crouched beside him, her hands carefully pressing a curved sheet of alloy against a broken beam. Her blue skin shimmered under the sunlight, dust clinging to her arms like silver powder. It's steady, she replied, her tone firm but soft. You humans like to shout when you work? Ethan smirked. Only when it's going right. Lyra almost smiled, almost. But then her eyes drifted to the edges of the village, where the burned remains of her neighbor's home still stood. This place was never meant to be rebuilt, she murmured. Even if we fix it, it'll never be the same. Ethan paused, studying her face. Maybe not, he said quietly. But that doesn't mean it can't be better. She didn't answer, but the corners of her lips twitched like she wanted to believe him. The little girl, Sarah, toddled nearby, clutching a broken crystal toy she had found in the rubble. Her laughter echoed faintly between the fallen walls. Ethan couldn't help but smile every time he heard it. That sound, small, innocent, alive, was proof that something still had a chance to grow here. He spent the day working. Lyra gathered materials, sorting broken glass and metal. Together they patched holes, built walls, and even created a roof strong enough to withstand wind. Every nail, every board, every piece of wire carried a piece of hope. When the sun began to set, Ethan leaned back, wiping his hands on his dusty shirt. Not bad, he said. It's starting to look like a home. Lyra looked at the small structure. It wasn't much. 4 walls, a door made from scavenged alloy, a window patched with crystal shards. But it was theirs. She looked at Ethan. Why do you do this? She asked suddenly. You could have left. You don't even know us. He stared at the fading sky for a moment before answering. Where I'm from, he said, storms took everything from me too. I remember being alone, just like you. Someone helped me once. I'm just returning the favor. Her eyes softened, but before she could reply, the air shifted. The wind picked up sharply, carrying a low hum. Ethan's head snapped toward the horizon. He didn't like that sound. He stepped away from the house and scanned the hills. There, in the distance, a shimmer of movement, shapes, metallic glints. Lyra's breath caught. Scavengers, she whispered. They found us, Ethan's expression hardened. How many? 3. No 4 ships. Small ones, she said. They'll come to take what's left. He quickly grabbed his rifle and checked the power cell. Get inside with Sarah, he ordered. Lyra hesitated. You can't fight them alone. Ethan's jaw tightened. I can slow them down. That's enough. She wanted to argue, but something in his tone stopped her. She pulled Sarah close and ran into the house. Ethan crouched behind a pile of debris, heart steady, eyes fixed on the sky. Moments later, the scavenger craft landed nearby, kicking up clouds of dust. 4 aliens stepped out, tall, armored, their faces hidden behind cracked visors. Looks like someone's been busy, one of them sneered. Didn't expect survivors here. Ethan didn't move. His hand gripped the rifle tightly. The scavenger stepped closer, kicking over a broken panel. We'll take whatever's left. Metals, power cells, and maybe the woman and kid, too. They'll sell well. Ethan stood up slowly, his shadow stretching long across the sand. You're not taking anything, he said quietly. The scavenger laughed. Big words for a human alone. Ethan's eyes narrowed. I'm not alone, he fired. The beam struck the lead scavenger square in the chest, sending him crashing backward. The others roared, lifting their weapons. Energy blasts tore through the air, lighting up the ruins. Ethan ducked behind the rubble, returning fire with precision. Inside the house, Sarah clung to her mother as dust rained from the ceiling. Lyra wanted to run out, but fear pinned her. All she could do was listen. The gunfire, the shouting, the chaos outside. Ethan fought like a man with nothing left to lose. He moved fast, silent, using the ruins as cover. Each shot he fired was careful, measured. 2 more scavengers fell. The last one charged him with a blade. They collided hard, rolling in the dirt. Ethan's gun flew aside. The alien swung wildly, metal clanging against stone. Ethan's arm bled, but he managed to grab a shard of broken crystal and thrust it forward. The scavenger fell still. For a long moment there was only silence. Then the wind returned, soft, slow, clean. Lyra rushed out, her eyes wide with terror. "Ethan!" she cried, kneeling beside him. He was covered in dust and blood, but alive. He smiled weakly. "Told you I could slow them down." She pressed her hands against his wound, trembling. "You could have died," she whispered. "Yeah," he said, his voice faint. "But then who'd finish the roof?" Tears fell from her eyes as she laughed softly, a broken, beautiful sound. As the twin suns sank beyond the ruins, the small house stood quiet and strong in the fading light. The scavengers were gone. The storm was gone. And though Ethan bled into the dust, he smiled, because for the first time since landing here, it truly felt like home. The next morning rose red in a warning sky. The air felt heavy, full of dust and silence. Ethan's shoulder burned where the blade had cut deep, but he kept moving. He had tied it with a strip of cloth, and though every step hurt, he didn't stop. Lyra watched him from the doorway, her eyes full of worry. "You should rest," she said softly. Ethan shook his head. "They'll come back," he said. "Raiders never stop after one try." She knew he was right. The scavengers always returned when they smelled weakness, and now they had seen a human protecting her, something her kind had never imagined. That alone would draw attention. Sarah, the little girl, peeked out from behind her mother, clutching a piece of the broken toy Ethan had fixed for her. "Is the bad sky coming again?" she asked in a trembling voice. Ethan crouched, wincing in pain, and smiled at her. "No, kid. Not if I can help it." But even as he said it, a deep rumble rolled through the distance and the sound of approaching ships. Lyra's heart froze. "They're here." Ethan's gaze turned to steel. "Then we end it today." The ships descended slowly, stirring clouds of sand around the ruins. 4 small craft, black and rusted, circled above like predators. Ethan and Lyra took shelter behind the half-built walls, the child hidden inside the house. Lyra gripped the edge of the doorframe, trembling. "We can't fight them all." Ethan checked his rifle. "We won't have to. We'll make them think we can." He connected 2 power cells with the small generator he'd taken from the village. Sparks flared. "This'll trigger when they come close," he explained. "It'll flash bright enough to blind them for a few seconds." Lyra stared at him. "You're building traps." "With scraps," he gave a faint grin. "Engineer's hobby." The sound of engines grew louder. Then the raiders landed. This time there were more, not scavengers, but a gang. 6 of them, their armor painted with black stripes. The leader was a tall alien with jagged silver scars across his face and eyes like molten glass. He stepped forward, his voice booming. "Human," he shouted. "You think killing my men makes you a hero? You've just made yourself a prize." Ethan stepped out from cover, rifle steady. "You want something, talk to me." The leader laughed cruelly. "Oh, we will. We'll take your ship, your weapons, and the woman and her child. She owes us." Lyra stepped forward then, trembling but fierce. "I owe you nothing, Freck. You left my husband to die." The leader, Freck, sneered. Terran was a fool who thought he could fight the storm. And now his wife hides behind a human. Ethan's eyes darkened. "Last warning, leave." Freck smiled, sharp and cold. "You don't give orders here, human." He raised his blaster. Before he could fire, Ethan hit the switch. A burst of white light exploded from the generator, blinding the raiders. Ethan moved instantly, shooting twice. 2 went down before they even saw him. Lyra ran to grab the rifle from a fallen raider, hands shaking but determined. "Inside," Ethan shouted. "Keep Sarah safe." Lyra ducked behind the walls, firing wildly at the approaching gang. The child cried inside the house, the sound cutting through the chaos. Ethan took cover, moving with precise speed. His injured arm screamed with pain, but he ignored it. Another raider charged. Ethan swung a broken pipe, smashing it into the alien's helmet. Sparks flew. The raider fell, then Rek lunged, bigger, faster, stronger. His weapon clashed against Ethan's, the force throwing both into the dust. "You fight for trash," Rek hissed. "I fight for people." Ethan spat back, blocking a strike. Rek slammed him into the ground, pressing the barrel of his gun against Ethan's throat. "You don't belong here, human." Before he could fire, a blast hit Rek's shoulder, Lyra's shot. She stood shaking, her hand still on the weapon. Rek roared in pain and turned toward her. Ethan used the moment to grab the fallen raider's blaster and fired. The beam struck Rek square in the chest. He fell backward, smoke rising from his armor. The silence that followed was thick and unreal. Only the wind moved. Ethan lowered his weapon slowly, his chest heaving. Lyra dropped the gun, tears streaming down her cheeks. She rushed to him. "You're hurt again," she said, pressing her hand over the wound on his arm. He looked at her, dust covering her face, eyes full of fear and strength, and smiled faintly. "You're getting better at shooting." She laughed softly through her tears. "You humans are insane." "Probably," he said, wincing as he sat down. "But we get things done." By sunset, the raiders' ships were silent and still. Ethan scavenged fuel and supplies from their wrecks, enough to keep them alive for weeks. Lyra helped him move the bodies to the edge of the valley, not out of hate, but respect for the dead. As they worked, the child came out quietly, carrying a small flower she had found growing through the cracks of stone. She placed it near the rebuilt wall. "For Daddy," she whispered. Lyra knelt beside her daughter, her voice breaking. "And for the man who saved us," she said softly. Ethan looked away, trying to hide the emotion burning in his chest. "Don't make me a hero," he said quietly. "Just make this place a home." Lyra turned toward him, her silver eyes glowing in the fading light. "It already is," she whispered, above them. The sky burned gold and violet, and for the first time, the ruins didn't look like a graveyard anymore. They looked like the beginning of something new. And though Ethan didn't say it, deep down he knew. This was no longer just about rebuilding walls. It was about rebuilding hearts. The night after the battle was quiet, too quiet. The fire crackled softly in the rebuilt home, casting warm light across the floor. But Ethan's face was pale, his breathing shallow. The cut on his shoulder had reopened, bleeding through the bandage. He tried to sit up, but his vision blurred. "Stay still," Lyra said firmly, pressing her hand against the wound. Her touch glowed faintly, the natural energy her species used for healing. The soft blue light wrapped around his arm, slowing the bleeding. Ethan grimaced. "You didn't tell me you could do that." Lyra's voice trembled slightly. "We only use it for family. It drains our strength." "Then don't," he said. "You'll hurt yourself." She ignored him. "You've already hurt enough for us." The light pulsed brighter, then faded as she pulled back, breathing heavily. Her hands shook. Ethan caught her wrist gently. "Lyra," I said, "don't talk," she whispered. "Just live." For a long while, the only sound was the crackling fire. Sarah slept quietly in the corner, clutching her toy. Outside, the wind howled softly through the ruins, carrying the faint scent of smoke and iron. When Ethan finally drifted to sleep, Lyra sat beside him, her thoughts heavy. She stared at his bandaged arm, at the human who had risked his life again and again for people not his own. Her people had called humans monsters, destroyers, beasts from the void, but now she wondered, if monsters bleed for strangers, what does that make the rest of them? She stayed awake until dawn. The next morning, she found Ethan sitting outside, staring at the horizon. His face was tired but calm. The sunlight made the dust sparkle like tiny stars. "You should be resting," she said. He smiled faintly. "If I rest any longer, I'll start growing roots." She walked over and sat beside him. For a while, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward anymore. It was peaceful. After a moment, Ethan said quietly, "You know, Back home, people like me didn't build things. We fixed them. Machines, reactors, old colonies, broken pieces no one else cared about. Lyra tilted her head. And now? He looked at the small house they had rebuilt. Now I'm fixing something that matters. Her lips curved slightly, but before she could reply, a faint hum echoed in the distance. Not from the wind this time. Ethan stiffened. That's an engine, he said. But not a raider ship. Lyra's face drained of color. It's from the capital, he turned to her. Your people? She nodded slowly. Yes, and if they see you here, they'll think you enslaved me. Ethan frowned. That's insane. They don't know you, she said softly. To them, humans are a story, a dangerous one. He stood quickly, grabbing his rifle. Then I'll leave before they land, but she grabbed his arm. If you run, they'll kill you. Ethan looked at her, really looked. The fear in her eyes wasn't for herself this time. It was for him. Then what do I do? He asked. Lyra hesitated. Let me speak for you. I'll make them see, he shook his head. They won't listen. She looked him in the eyes. Then they'll listen to me. The ship arrived minutes later, kicking up a storm of dust. Soldiers in silver armor stepped out, their weapons gleaming. Their leader, a tall alien woman with golden markings on her skin, looked around with disgust. What is this place? She demanded. We received reports of human activity. Lyra stepped forward, her chin raised. There's no invasion here, she said. Only survival. The soldiers aimed their weapons. You dare speak in defense of a human? The leader hissed. He saved my life, Lyra said, her voice steady. He saved my child. When the storm destroyed everything, when you abandoned us, he stayed. The soldiers murmured among themselves. The leader narrowed her eyes. And what does the human say for himself? Ethan stepped out slowly, unarmed. I don't want trouble. I just wanted to help. The leader looked at him with cold curiosity. Why? What could you gain from this? Ethan glanced at the small house behind him, the walls patched, the window glowing faintly with light. Nothing, he said, except a promise kept. The leader stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she lowered her weapon. You're either a fool or the bravest man I've seen, she said. Maybe both, Ethan replied. The leader turned to Lyra. You are free to choose your fate. But if you stay with him, your people will never accept you again. Lyra looked at Ethan, then at her child. Her voice trembled, but her eyes did not. Then I choose the one who built me a home. The leader said nothing. She simply turned and signaled her soldiers to withdraw. Within moments, the ship lifted off, vanishing into the clouds. When the dust settled, Ethan looked at Lyra. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. I wanted to, she replied. You gave us a chance to live. I'll never turn away from that. He smiled weakly. You're going to get tired of me one day. Maybe, she said, almost smiling back. But not today. They stood side by side, watching the horizon where the ship had vanished. The wind was calm now. The storm, the raiders, the fear, all gone. Only the sound of life remained. Sarah laughing softly as she played among the flowers growing through the cracks of the old road. For the first time in a long time, Lyra realized something simple and beautiful. The cost of kindness was heavy, but it was worth carrying, and beside her, the tired human who had rebuilt her world just smiled, as if he already knew. The first rays of dawn touched the horizon, turning the ruins into rivers of gold. The storm clouds had drifted far away, leaving behind a calm that almost felt unreal. A soft wind carried the scent of fresh dust and new life. For the first time since Ethan's ship had crashed, the sky looked peaceful. He stood outside the small house they had built, their house now. Its patched walls gleamed faintly in the light, the roof curved unevenly but strong. He ran his hand over the surface of the metal, feeling its warmth. It wasn't perfect, but it stood, and that was enough. Behind him, Lyra stepped out carrying 2 mugs of warm drink. The steam rose into the cold morning air, curling like threads of smoke. She handed one to him, her eyes soft but tired. You didn't sleep, she said quietly. Ethan took the cup and smiled faintly. Couldn't, I kept thinking about... What's next? She sat beside him on the low stone step. There doesn't have to be a next, she said. Sometimes it's enough just to be here. He took a sip, then looked at her. You really plan to stay here? Even after your people left you? Lyra's gaze drifted toward the fields beyond the ruins, where the first green shoots were breaking through the ash. They didn't leave me. she said softly. They left their hearts behind. Maybe one day they'll find them again, and when they do, I want them to see this place and alive again. Ethan looked around. The house stood like a symbol of defiance, a scar turned into something beautiful. The little girl, Sarah, played nearby, chasing a glowing insect that fluttered through the light. Her laughter carried through the still air, pure, honest, alive. He felt something stir in his chest, something deeper than gratitude. It was belonging. Later that morning, Ethan walked to the edge of the ruins. His small shuttle still sat there, half buried in sand. The hull was dented, one engine useless, but the core system still worked. He stared at it for a while, torn between two worlds, the one he came from and the one he had stumbled into. He could leave. He could fix the ship with the spare parts from the Raiders' wreckage, fly back to the colonies, report the storm, the loss, the survivors. He could go home. But as he looked back at the house, at Lyra standing in the doorway, her hair catching the wind, at Sarah running in circles around her mother, the word home no longer meant what it used to. He took a deep breath, then walked back slowly. Inside the house, Lyra was cleaning the small table they'd built from old planks. She turned when she heard him enter. "Did you check your ship?" "Yeah," he said. "It can fly again." She paused, her hands freezing mid-motion. "You're leaving?" Ethan didn't answer at first. He leaned against the wall, his gaze heavy. "I thought about it," he admitted. "But every time I look at that ship, I just don't want to." Her breath caught. "Why?" He looked at her and smiled gently. "Because maybe I've already found what I was looking for." Lyra stared at him, words caught in her throat. Her heart pounded in her chest, though she didn't understand why. "Ethan," she whispered, "if you stay, you'll be giving up everything." He shook his head. "No, I'll be keeping something that matters." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The morning light poured through the cracked window, wrapping them both in warmth. Then Sarah ran in, holding a small flower she had found growing near the wall. "Look," she said brightly. "The ground's not broken anymore." Ethan knelt, taking the flower from her tiny hands. "You're right," he said softly. "It's healing." Lyra knelt beside them, her eyes glistening. "So are we." As the day went on, they worked together again, not to rebuild, but to create. Ethan showed Lyra how to shape metal frames into tools, while she taught him how to use the strange seeds her people once farmed before the storms. The house became more than shelter. It became a beginning. When night finally fell, the stars shone brighter than ever before. Ethan and Lyra sat outside, the child asleep inside. The air was cool, quiet, full of peace. Lyra broke the silence first. "You know, I used to think the storms came to punish us," she said. "Now I think they came to test who would stand after them." Ethan glanced at her. "Then I guess we passed." She smiled faintly. "No, you did." He looked up at the stars, his voice gentle. "We both did. You just needed someone to remind you how." Lyra's gaze softened. The firelight flickered across his face, and in that glow she saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. Trust. Hope. Maybe even love. A long silence stretched between them, comfortable and full. Then far on the horizon, a soft glow began to rise in the twin suns of her world. Their light spilled across the ruins, washing everything in gold. The house shimmered in that light, its metallic roof glowing as if alive. It wasn't grand. It wasn't perfect. But it stood strong and a monument to kindness, to survival, to the bond between two souls who should never have met. Lyra whispered, barely audible. "You didn't just build us a home, Ethan. You built something no storm can ever destroy." He turned to her, eyes reflecting the dawn. "What's that?" "Faith," she said. He smiled, a tired, human smile full of warmth and truth. The wind moved softly through the rebuilt village, carrying the scent of dawn and hope. The light grew brighter, spilling over the stones, the hills, and the small home that stood defiant in the dust. And as the suns rose high above them, the once ruined world began to shine again, because a human had stayed when no one else would, because kindness had conquered the storm.